You ever wonder how much legal weight a headline has? I'm not talking about a newspaper headline, but the title of an actual law. I mean, can one single word in a title completely flip the meaning of a whole statute? Well, back in 1933, that exact question was at the center of a murder case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Okay, let's get into this. This is the fascinating case of People versus Yabut.
All right, let's set the scene. We're inside the walls of Bilibid Prison in Manila. It's August 1st, 1932, sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock at night. The cell block, Brigade 8A, is on lockdown. Now, this isn't just any old cell block. It's home to about 150 inmates, all of them serving long sentences. So you can imagine the atmosphere is tense. And a really, really small dispute is about to explode into violence.
It all started with an argument over 2 packs of cigarettes. One of the prisoners, a guy named Sabas Eseo, is standing there with his back turned. Out of nowhere, another inmate sneaks up behind him and just smacks him twice with a wooden club, fracturing his skull. Eseo goes down, and he dies from his injuries about 24 hours later. And here's the crazy part. Both the attacker and the victim were already prisoners serving time.
So, who was the man with the club? His name was Antonio Yabut, and his background is absolutely crucial to this story. See, he wasn't new to this. At the time of the attack, he was already in prison serving a sentence for, you guessed it, homicide. And on top of that, he had other convictions for another homicide and for serious physical injuries. He was what the law calls a recidivist, a repeat offender. And that fact is going to become the entire focus of his case.
Now here's where it gets interesting. Yabut didn't really argue about the attack itself. I mean, there were eyewitnesses, the facts were pretty clear. Instead, his defense team did something, well, pretty clever. His entire appeal wasn't about what happened, but about how the law that punished what happened should be read. He basically built his whole case on a tiny technicality, a single word in the title of the law.
So this is the whole crux of the case. Yabut's lawyers stood up and argued that the specific law being used to give him a harsher penalty, well, it just didn't apply to him. And why not? All because of how the law was titled in its English translation. Just like that, a straightforward murder case turned into this high-stakes debate about how you're even supposed to interpret the law.
Okay, let's break his argument down. The law they were using is Article 160 of the Revised Penal Code. In English, the headline for that article reads, Commission of Another Crime. So Yabut's argument was that the word another meant a different kind of crime. Since he was already in for homicide and was now charged with murder, which is, a pretty related offense, he claimed this wasn't really another crime like the headline meant. The prosecution, of course, was like, no. The text of the law just says you commit any new felony while you're serving your sentence. That's it.
So, this whole mess landed right in the lap of the Supreme Court. They had to settle it. And to do that, they put Article 160 itself right under the microscope, and they went all the way back to the original source text, and what they found there is where this whole case really turns.
And here you can see the court's logic laid out, plain as day. The law was originally written in Spanish, right? And the original Spanish text, in the body of the law, uses the phrase algún delito, which means any felony. The English translation says a felony. In both versions, the meaning is exactly the same. Not a different kind of felony, not an unrelated felony, but simply any felony. With that, the court's conclusion was swift and frankly a no-brainer. They said, look, the text of Article 160 is crystal clear. It leaves zero room for any creative interpretations based on one kind of misleading word in a translated headline. The law applies to any person who commits any felony while serving a sentence. Period. End of story.
Now, this ruling wasn't just about what would happen to Antonio Yabut. Nope. It reinforced a huge, powerful, and lasting legal principle. When it comes to understanding a law, the text itself is king. The headings, the titles, they're just secondary.
The court even gave this a name, the epigraph rule. Now, epigraph is just a fancy legal term for the heading or title of a statute. And the court basically declared that these headings are just catchwords. They're like a convenient index to help you find the right section in a huge law book. They are not the law itself. They can't change or limit the plain, clear words in the body of the text. And this line from the court's decision, man, it just sums up the whole thing perfectly. They said that you can use things like headings, secondary aids, to help clear things up if the main text is confusing. But what you absolutely cannot do is use a heading to create confusion or ambiguity where the text is already perfectly clear. And that's exactly what Yabut's whole argument tried to do. So with that big legal principle firmly established, what was the final verdict for Antonio Yabut? Let's walk through the court's final ruling.
Okay, so first things first, the court completely shut down Yabut's clever argument about the word another. They said, nice try, but no. Second, they confirmed that Article 160, with its tougher penalty, was absolutely the right law to use. But then, there was a little twist. Looking at the facts, some of the justices had a reasonable doubt about whether the killing legally qualified as treachery, or alevosía, which you need for a murder conviction. So they convicted him of the lesser crime of homicide instead.
So, what did that mean for his sentence? Because Article 160 was still applied, Antonio Yabut was sentenced to the absolute maximum period for homicide, 20 years of reclusión temporal. His linguistic gamble totally failed, and the law, exactly as it was written, was upheld.
At the end of the day, the Yabut case leaves us with a really critical lesson about how our legal system is supposed to work. It hammers home the idea that the law is found in the actual lines of the text, not in the titles that introduce them. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? In a world full of complex language and clever arguments, how do we make sure that the plain, simple meaning of the law always wins out?